I'm Agnes Thornton, and on an ordinary Tuesday, I was halfway through a pitch when the room blinked out like a bad signal. The clicker slipped from my palm, the slide froze on a market share chart, and a nail of light drove behind my right eye. Someone asked if I needed water. I said I was fine. The carpet rushed up and the ceiling slid away. I woke to antiseptic air and a machine pacing my heartbeat in beeps. A doctor with KM eyes stood where a client should have been. "We called your parents," she said. "They said they were coming." She glanced at the clock as if the hands could explain the empty doorway. Hours thinned. No one arrived. My name band pinched my wrist. I told myself flights get delayed, calendars get messy, families make mistakes. The lie felt practiced to sound like truth. By dusk, the city outside my window turned copper and my phone buzzed in my lap. A red dot, a tag, my sister Clara's handle. I tapped and a photo filled the screen. Matching t-shirts, a roller coaster's ribs against a clear sky. My parents smiling under a banner that read Thornton Family Day. The caption was small, but it detonated just the same. Family Day, without the drama. The room didn't tilt this time, it narrowed. I could taste metal. Somewhere down the hall, a nurse laughed. A normal sound in a place that had decided what I was to the people who raised me. Optional. Not worth a detour. I locked the screen and set the phone face down like a hot pan. The monitor kept counting. I counted with it, not minutes, but decisions. If blood didn't bind us here, then something else had to. From the outside, our family always looked polished, the kind of image neighbors copied for their Christmas cards. My father, Gerald, owned an architectural practice that gave him tailored suits and a perpetual air of certainty. My mother, Marilyn, kept classrooms of third graders spellbound and carried that same patience home, though it seemed to evaporate when it came to me. And then there was Clara, older by 3 years, the flawless one. Every photograph proved it. Clara at the center, her hair glossy, her smile practiced. My parents angled toward her like sunflowers. I was usually at the edge, half in shadow, holding a ribbon no one mentioned, or a project nobody asked about. I remember a science fair when I was 14. My volcano spewed red-dyed foam, fizzing exactly on cue. Dad gave it a single nod before turning to Clara's exhibit 2 tables over. She had built a solar system model so intricate it could have hung in a museum. He called colleagues over, beaming, while I scraped foam off the floor tiles. Later, in the car, he said, "Why can't you apply yourself like your sister?" I swallowed hard and stared at the window. It wasn't that I failed. I made honor roll, joined debate club, volunteered weekends at the shelter. But Clara's spotlight drowned me out. When she won first place, my second place became invisible. When she earned an A+, my A was treated like a shrug. Even birthdays bent around her. My 16th landed on the same weekend as her sorority formal. My parents drove 6 hours to help her get ready, leaving me with a store-bought cake on the kitchen counter. A sticky note perched beside it read, "We'll celebrate next week." We never did. By the time I graduated high school, I stopped hoping. They came with cameras, smiled when my name was called, and spent the dinner afterward toasting Clara's engagement to Travis, the medical student with pedigree. My acceptance to a university out west earned only, "That's far from home," said with mild disapproval. I chose it precisely for the distance, to breathe without comparisons ringing in my ears. And yet, the ghost of those comparisons never left. Each holiday phone call echoed the same refrain. Clara's children, Clara's house, Clara's promotions. My updates floated like afterthoughts. By then, I had learned the rule. In our family, love wasn't spread equally. It was rationed, and Clara always held the larger share. Moving to Denver felt like walking out from under a canopy I hadn't realized was blocking the sun. The air was thinner, sharper, almost daring me to breathe deeper. My apartment was a narrow 1-bedroom with chipped tiles and a view of a parking lot. But it was mine. No one compared it to Clara's 5-bedroom colonial or sighed about grandchildren who didn't exist. Work became my anchor. I landed a position at a growing marketing firm downtown, and the city swallowed me whole in a way that felt liberating. Campaigns, deadlines, late nights under fluorescent light. They became proof that I could stand on my own. Each client that signed, each strategy that worked was a tiny rebellion against the invisibility that haunted me back east. I built routines that had nothing to do with family obligations. Saturday mornings were for farmers markets, where I bought flowers even if I couldn't afford them. Evenings sometimes meant pottery class, where my clay bowls leaned like tipsy drunks, but nobody told me they weren't good enough. I collected friendships. 2, co-workers who invited me to trivia nights, neighbors who watered my plants when I traveled. They weren't lifelong bonds, but they were mine, chosen instead of assigned. Still, there was an ache that surfaced at odd moments. Watching a colleague hug her mother after a promotion, seeing airport reunions with signs and tears. That hunger for recognition, for a hand on my shoulder saying, "We're proud of you," never fully disappeared. Phone calls home never filled the gap. Mom's voice was warm but distracted, cataloging Clara's children's milestones before I had the chance to mention my own. When I told them about a new client worth millions, Dad said, "That's good?" Then asked if I was dating anyone. Every call left me strangely hollow, as if I were reporting to an indifferent board of directors rather than a family. I told myself the distance was better, that choosing solitude was different from being forgotten. But deep down, I feared the truth. No matter how far I ran, the absence of their love still shaped every step I took. The morning it happened, I woke with a headache that felt like a vice tightening around my skull. I told myself it was nerves. The pitch I'd spent weeks preparing for was too important to miss. A national brand had asked for a full reimagining of their image, and my boss had handed me the reins. This was my chance to prove myself, maybe finally secure the promotion I'd been chasing. I dressed carefully in a charcoal suit that swallowed half my rent, and a silk blouse I saved for moments when confidence had to be stitched on. At the office, the conference room hummed with anticipation. Executives from the client company filed in, all sharp eyes and sharper questions. I smiled, steadied my notes, and started speaking. For the first 15 minutes, I hit every mark. Slide after slide flickered on the screen, each statistic punctuating my words. Then, without warning, the floor seemed to tilt. Faces blurred, voices warped, and the light above me burned too bright. My hand clutched the edge of the table, desperate for balance. As you can see, my own voice sounded far away, detached, as if someone else was speaking. The pain behind my eye sharpened into something white-hot. I reached for my water glass, but my fingers refused to cooperate. The room dissolved into streaks of color. Someone called my name, rising panic in their tone, but I couldn't answer. My legs gave out. Darkness swallowed everything. When I surfaced again, I was in an ambulance. A paramedic leaned over, asking questions I couldn't form words to answer. Sirens wailed, lights strobed against the windows, and fear pressed down harder than the straps holding me. The next memory is a blur of hospital ceilings, fluorescent light, and the sterile scent of antiseptic. By the time I fully woke, machines beeped steadily beside me, tethering me to reality. A doctor leaned close and said, "You collapsed at work. Severe exhaustion, possible complications. We're running tests. We called your emergency contacts." Her pause was heavy. "Your parents. They said they were coming." She didn't finish the sentence, but I already knew what she meant. The first night in the hospital passed in fragments. Nurses checking vitals, the hiss of oxygen somewhere down the hall, my own thoughts clanging like loose metal. I kept glancing at the door, expecting it to open. Every set of footsteps outside made my pulse leap, only to fall again when they kept going. By morning, hope had thinned into something brittle. I tried to convince myself that maybe flights were delayed or schedules tangled, but deep down, I recognized the familiar shape of disappointment. I'd known it since childhood. The silence of being left behind had its own taste. That afternoon, when the room finally quieted, I reached for my phone, the screen lit with notifications. For a second, I thought maybe it was them, missed calls, worried texts. Instead, the top alert was from Clara. She had tagged me in a post. My thumb hesitated, but instinct won. The photo appeared bright and cheerful. My parents, Clara, her husband, and their kids standing at the entrance of a theme park, all wearing matching shirts printed with Thornton Family Day. Their smiles stretched wide, their eyes lit with the ease of a perfect outing. And then the caption, tiny but brutal, Family Day, without the drama. My chest hollowed out. They weren't just absent. They were celebrating my absence. Without the drama could only mean me, the difficult daughter, the one better left out of the frame. I set the phone face down, but the words burned through the plastic like acid. The hospital bed creaked as I shifted, trying to breathe past the tightness in my throat. Tears threatened, but I pressed them back. Crying wouldn't fix anything. In that moment, the truth was carved sharp. If even this, a collapse, a hospital bed, the threat of something wrong inside my skull, wasn't enough to make me matter, then nothing ever would. I lay there in the dim light, heart pounding, and thought about how many years I had begged for their recognition. Maybe the begging stopped now. Maybe it had to. The day after the tag, I woke to find someone sitting in the chair beside my bed. It wasn't my parents. It wasn't Clara. It was Elena, a junior copywriter who had joined the firm only months ago. She looked up from her phone, her face brightening. "Finally," she said, "you're awake. I brought your charger and some pajamas. I used the spare key you gave me. Hope that's okay." The kindness cracked something in me. I had known her barely long enough to share coffee breaks, yet here she was with a tote bag of my belongings, staying when the people who should have been here never came. Later that night, during a shift change, a nurse named Jordan took over my care. She was talkative, quick to smile, and didn't seem bothered that I had no visitors. "You'd be surprised," she said, adjusting my IV. "More patients than you think go through serious procedures alone. But you know what? Staff becomes family in places like this. We've got your back." Her words lodged deep. Family. That word had always meant a door slammed in my face. Hearing it offered so simply, without conditions, felt almost like a foreign language. The tests confirmed what I had feared since the collapse, a tumor pressing against my brains. The neurologist explained surgery was the best option. The words should have sent me spiraling, but all I could think about was who would sit in the waiting room when they wheeled me away. Not my parents. Not Clara. Elena returned after work, plopping into the chair with snacks and gossip from the office. Her chatter a distraction from the storm inside me. Jordan checked in every few hours, her presence steady as a lighthouse beam. Strangers, almost, yet they were the ones keeping me from drowning. That night, for the first time, I allowed myself to wonder, maybe family wasn't about blood at all. Maybe it was about who showed up when the world fell apart. 3 days into my hospital stay, my phone lit up again, not with an apology, but with urgency. 17 missed calls from my father, 22 from my mother, and nearly 30 from Clara. A single text sat at the bottom of the flood. "Your grandfather had a stroke. He's asking for you. Call us." My chest tightened. Grandpa William, the only one in our family who had ever seen me without comparison, who called me my clever girl and never once asked why I wasn't more like Clara. The man who mailed me handwritten letters in college just to say he was proud. He was asking for me now, and I was lying in a hospital bed recovering from scans that had revealed a tumor inside my skull. I pressed the call button. When Jordan entered, I showed her the screen. "They've ignored me for days," I said, voice brittle. "Now they need me." She studied my face, then sat gently on the edge of the bed. "The question isn't what they want. It's what you want." Later, when I finally dialed my father, he answered on the first ring. "Agnes, where have you been? We've been calling for days. No hello, no concern, just accusation." "I've been in the hospital," I said evenly. "Collapsed at work. They found a tumor. I had surgery." Silence stretched so long, I thought the call had dropped. Then, a stammer, "Why didn't you tell us?" "The hospital did," I shot back. "You chose roller coasters over me." Another silence, heavier this time. "Finally," his voice cracked. "We didn't think it was serious." I let the words hang. The truth was clear. What was serious to them had never been me. "Still," I said, "I want to see Grandpa. Can you set up a video call?" A pause, then a weary, "Yes." "We'll arrange it." I hung up, my hand trembling, but my resolve sharp. If they wanted to pretend now, fine. But this time, I would speak my truth. The video call came that evening. My father fumbled with the angle. My mother hovered in the background. Clara leaned too close as if trying to control the frame. But all I saw was Grandpa William, propped up in a hospital bed, thinner than I remembered. His voice slurred yet steady when he said, "There you are, my clever girl." I tried to smile, to hide the bandage circling my head, but his sharp eyes caught it. "What happened to you?" he asked. "Just a little surgery," I whispered, but he didn't buy it. "Tumor," he said bluntly. "They told me." "And you went through that alone." The words cracked me open. Tears slid before I could stop them. "Yes, Grandpa, alone." He shook his head weakly, then turned his gaze toward the others. "And why was that?" The silence on their end spoke louder than excuses. Clara shifted first. "We didn't know it was so serious." I cut her off, my voice sharper than I intended. "The hospital called. That should have been enough. But you still went to a theme park and tagged me without the drama. Do you have any idea what that felt like?" Her face reddened. My mother gasped, covering her mouth. My father cleared his throat, searching for words. Grandpa didn't let them. For years, I've watched this family give everything to Clara, while Agnes stood invisible. I kept quiet because it wasn't my place. "But I'm dying, so I'll say it now. You failed her." Not once, but again and again. The weight of his words filled the screen. My father tried to protest, but Grandpa silenced him with a glare that even sickness couldn't dull. I spoke through the ache in my throat. "I don't need apologies. I need change. I need to matter, even when it's inconvenient." For the first time, they looked shaken, not defensive, just silent. Clara lowered her eyes. My mother's cheeks glistened with tears. My father seemed suddenly small. Grandpa's hand trembled as he reached toward the camera. "Agnes, stop running from them. Say your truth, then decide. Running only keeps the hurt alive." I have said it, I told him. And I won't run anymore. But whether they choose to see me, that's theirs to decide. 2 weeks later, against my surgeon's cautious advice, I boarded a train east. The ride rattled every stitch in my skull, but I needed to see Grandpa one last time. When I slipped into his hospital room, he smiled faintly, eyes bright despite the toll of the stroke. "You came," he whispered. "Of course I did," I said, taking his hand. "You've always been there for me. I had to be here for you." He passed a few days later, quietly, with my hand still in his. The grief was sharp, but it was also clean. He had given me clarity in his final weeks, clarity about who had valued me all along, and who never truly had. The cabin by the lake came to me in his will. That place of childhood summers became my sanctuary for recovery. Each sunset over the water was a balm. Every loon call across the surface, a reminder that I wasn't invisible. My parents and Clara reached out. Awkward visits, hesitant calls, clumsy attempts at reconciliations. I didn't slam the door, but I no longer bent myself into their shape. Sometimes they tried. Sometimes they slipped back into old patterns. Either way, I didn't measure myself against their approval anymore. What mattered were the people who had shown up. Elena, bringing laughter and casseroles to the cabin. Nurse Jordan, texting to check on me as if I were family. The support group from the hospital who turned into lifelong friends. They weren't bound to me by blood, yet they held me up when the ones who were bound turned their backs. I stand on the dock most evenings now, watching the sky bleed gold into the water. And I know this: family isn't always who raises you. Sometimes it's who carries you when you collapse, who sits beside your bed when fear is thick, who proves you're worth showing up for. That is the family I choose.